Thank you. So, I will start my presentation with a postmodern view of translation as the performative nature of cultural communication, formulated by Homi Bhabha in The Location of Culture. To translate the source text into a discourse means to translate it into a connected, purposeful, and cooperative communication that will enable the translators to make textually asymmetric decisions. Translation as action, or the generation of meaning by specific participants in specific communicative situations, presupposes performativity both on the textual level, meaning as generated by the translator's implicatures rather than by an abstract system of linguistic relations, and on the metatextual level, translation as criticism or any other ethical gesture of the translator. The performative dimension thus implies specific communicative situations in which translations are being carried out and their particular national contexts. I will specifically consider shifts of coherence in the postmodern translations into Ukrainian that result from the change in audience. According to the late Shoshana Blumkulka, professor emerita at the Hebrew University, Jerusalem, quote, "The clearest examples of shifts of coherence that result from the change in audience and not language come from the area of reference. Whether real-world or literary allusions to persons, places, or other texts may play a central role in building up the coherence of a given story. In translation, what is important, the translator becomes the judge as to the extent to which he or she finds it necessary to explain the source text's reference network to the target language audience." A popular post-Soviet poet, novelist, and essayist, Yuri Andreyevich, who became the cutter and stylist model of Ukrainian postmodernism, in his renderings of both a classical play, which is Shakespeare's Hamlet, first edition in 2000, and American poetry of the 1950s, 60s, belonging to the Beat Generation poets, deliberately floats a canon-bound envision of the text in the reader's mind and tackles the crucial issue of deconstructing the stereotypes of Soviet mentality by ironic or satiric allusions to commonly known quotations, titles of literary works, and trite phrases that reflect the Soviet institutionalized language, with its manifold educational, cultural, and social cliches that shine through his translations and saturate them with farcical humor. Here you have the 2008 Ababa Halamaha publishes edition of Hamlet by William Shakespeare as their first book for adult audiences, edition type premium, printing with bronze and gold, stamping on fabric. The edition was translated by Yuri Andreyevich and illustrations were done by Vladislav Yerko. Let us have a look at some of the Baroque weird illustrations by Vladislav Yerko, for instance, talking heads, or another one, it's Hamlet with the skull of Yorick. So let us have a look at the book presentation by the translator himself. In the forefront, Yuri Andreyevich. In the back front, it's the publisher, Ivan Malkovich. The book won a Grand Prix at the 15th Lviv Forum of Publishers in 2008. In his postmodernist inversion of Shakespeare and Hamlet, the translator is wearing a mocking grotesque mask. Moreover, he creates numerous newly based allusions and reminiscences there. Shifts of allusivity may be linked to a change in reader audience through translation, but in Andreyevich, they result not only from the change in reader audience, but also from the translator's deliberate change in the area of reference. For instance, in Act 3, Scene 2, as the play within the play begins and the players act out the poisoning of the king and the wooing and winning of the queen by the poisoner, Ophelia enters and cries, "What means this, my lord?" And Hamlet answers, "Mary, this is michin malecho," it means mischief. Thus, Shakespeare himself supplies the definition, mischief. Have a look at another illustration by Vladislav Yerko. Hamlet is giving instructions to the players. In his rendering of this famous Hamlet's cue addressed to Ophelia, Mary, this is Michin Malecho, it means mischief, Andruchovich mockingly alludes to the title of post-Shakespearean classical works, namely to a play Cabaret und Liebe, Intrigue and Love by Friedrich von Schiller, and a novel Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, both of which the Soviet literary critics had ranked among politically tendentious books that the Soviet literary canon had been based on. Це така сценка під назвою «Підступність без любові» або «Злочин без кари» in translation. Further follows an illustration of this scene by Vladislav Yerko. In Act 5, Scene 2, while rendering Hamlet's cue concerning a faked-up letter to the King of England, Andruchovich alludes to the bombastic style of a highly talented Ukrainian poet and a well-known member of the Soviet literary nomenclature, Pavlo Tychina, in particular to the first stanza of his poem «Чуття єдиної родини», The Feeling of a Single Family, that opened Tychina's poetry collection of that name in 1938, which propagated and glorified the Soviet regime in Ukraine. Below on the slide, there is an illustration of Hamlet's journey to England. So, Hamlet. As love between them like the palm might flourish, as peace should steal her wit and garland wear, and stand a comma between their amities. In translation, by Andruchovich, зважаючи також на пальмоцвітне перевисання наших двох народів, що скріплене вінком із колосків. So, пальмоцвітне перевисання наших двох народів sorry. It's an ironic reminiscence to the first stanza of Pavlo Tychina's poem «Чуття єдиної родини», which begins his poetry collection of the same name. And this poetry collection, as I said, glorifies the Soviet regime. If we compare, for instance, those lines with Grigory Kocher's translation, which is included in the high school curriculum from the 2003 posthumous edition, we will find no such allusions. Other shifts of allusivity in Hamlet make the text recognizable, coherent for Ukrainian readers. I will skip those allusions to save more time for the rest of my presentation. The scene of duel between Laertes and Hamlet, illustrations by Vladislav Yerko. Hamlet, here thou incestuous, murderous, damned Dane, drink off this potion. Is thy union here? Follow. I'm sorry. Follow my mother. Here there is a biblical reminiscence, although it is generously spiced with pop-style vulgarisms. Подохни, get croaked, виродку, a degenerate, почваро, monster, etc. In his entertaining renderings of the beat poets, Andruchovich uses burlesque expedients even more readily than in his Hamlet, together with the language of marginal social groups, so that to start the translated text with allusions and reminiscences of the Soviet socio-cultural reality with its rhetoric of ideology and class struggle. Further, I will discuss the reader-focused shifts of coherence through translation in the Book of American Poetry of the 1950s-60s, The Day of Death of Mrs. Day. For instance, the poem Marriage, 1958, by Gregory Corso, who was an American poet, youngest of the inner circle of Beat generation poets. So, in his translation of this poem, Andruchovich makes the text of this poem a coherent discourse for the Ukrainian reader, and the poem undergoes both changes and losses of its meaning potential through his translation. Andruchovich thus relies on a new type of audience which can apply to his translation relevant schemas and on an envisionment of the text in the Ukrainian reader's mind. Andreyevich mostly creates new allusions and associations. Just a couple of words about the author, Gregory Corso, and his grave in Rome. His ashes were deposited at the foot of the grave of poet Percy Bysshe Shelley in the Protestant cemetery in Rome. Corso was a Catholic, by the way, and the cemetery was strictly Protestant, but an exception was made for Corso specifically. And a poem which is written on his gravestone: "Spirit is life, it flows through the death of me endlessly, like a river unafraid of becoming the sea." Actually, Corso wrote his own epitaph. Further, follow several cases of travesty of the source text allusions introduced by Andreyevich into his translation of the poem Marriage, in place of the source text elusive asemantic phrases, which can also be called non sequitur or word salad phrases. Non sequitur is a statement that is not connected in a logical or clear way to anything said before it, and word salad is a confused or unintelligible mixture of seemingly random words and phrases. And the very beginning of the poem: "Should I get married? Should I be good? Astound the girl next door with my velvet suit and Foster's hood. Don't take her to movies but to cemeteries. Tell all about werewolf bathtubs and forked clarinets." Andreyevich translates with, again, numerous derogatory, pejorative slang words like marriage, it's женячка, писька, pussy, втирати, it's slang to blear the eye. Underlined on the slide are the vulgar slang words used by the translator as a powerful means of deconstructing these stereotypes of Soviet mentality, in place of a mellifluous marriage of words, as one of the bloggers once called Corso's style. Further example, concerning an introduction of the protagonist to his fiancée's parents. For instance, a Flash Gordon soap, an underlined expression. In translation, it's literal, actually, Flash Gordon, literal translation, but the translator supplied it with an explanatory note. In his footnote, the translator compares this sort of soap as a token of mediocre American family life to similar tokens of Soviet urban life, such as toilet soaps, Carmen, and Shipper. And Shipper being much better known as a quality sort of eau de cologne that Soviet alcoholics used to drink instead of vodka, which was in low supply in the late Soviet Union. So everybody understands immediately. As another case in point, consider a travesty of the bridegroom by means of a Russian vulgar slang word, MODOK. The priest asks the protagonist, "Do you take this woman for your lawful wedded wife?" And I, trembling what to say paiglу. В перекладі я тремчу і хочу сказати in translation. Ну так, а виходить мудак. Мудак, it's a moron, asshole, arsehole, turd, scum, whatever. By the way, compare with the Russian translation by Jan, и я судорожно соображаю, что бы такое сказать. Например, бульбуль. Бульбуль, it's neutral translation. It's gargle, gurgle. By the way, paiglу, it's actually I do. So that should be a Scooby-Doo, for instance, according to a comic guess of another blogger. Consider a very important travesty of the Soviet people, of whom the translator makes a laughingstock by overturning the ethical values of the Soviet ideology in a newly coined mock phrase «коти совкові», introduced in the place of the source a semantic phrase «cat shovel». That is based on a pejorative slang word savok, which means browbeaten and practically disenfranchised Soviet citizen, and has to denote typical Soviet time servers and Philistines. Stay up all night, stare the hotel clerk in the eye, screaming, I deny honeymoon, and so on. By the way, I deny honeymoon, this phrase is also translated pejoratively, like маю в дупі медовий місяць, a chorus phrase, I have honeymoon in my ass. Коти совкові. By the way, compare with Russian translation by Jan, Radio Pupok, Koshkin Savok. It's a calque or loan translation. What cat shovel can actually mean? It could be either semantically an excavator bucket or a scoop for cleaning cats' droppings. Anyway, the Ukrainian translation has a clear allusion to the Soviet citizen, Savok. The next example and the underlined asemantic phrases within it. But I should get married. I should be good. How nice it'd be to come home to her and sit by the fireplace, and she in the kitchen, aproned, young and lovely, wanting my baby, and so happy about me, she burns the roast beef and comes crying to me, and I get up from my big papa chair, saying, Christmas teeth, radiant brains, apple deaf. God, what a husband I'd make. Yes, I should get married. And in the translation of the underlined phrases, різдвяні зуби, променисті мізки, яблучна глухота, they are literal translations, although the surrealistic phrase Christmas teeth may be easily understood. It may have an explanation which comes actually from an extremely popular Christmas song written in 1944 by Donald Gardner. And this song follows. Donald Gardner worked as a music teacher for the second graders, so it's quite popular. The song is popular with numerous parodies on it. Nevertheless, the Ukrainian translator did not notice the origin of his multi-layered allusion. Another interesting case, renowned allusion from this poem, and when the milkman comes, leave him a note in the bottle, penguin dust, bring me penguin dust, I want penguin dust. Translation, тлін пінгвіна, дай мені тлін пінгвіна, хочу тлін пінгвіна. So Andruchovich renders dust as wreck, ruin, decay. Although there may be numerous associations, even a weird one, as one quipster put it, penguin dust is a drug given to penguins that gives them happy feet. An association with a 2006 Australian-American musical family film, Happy Feet. Compare, by the way, with the translation by Jan, «Я хочу птичьего молока», so Jan chooses an unobtainable delicacy in this place, a Polish idiom, ptasze mleczko. Well, to substantiate my observations, I will refer to an article, Is This Marriage? The Beat Generation and Gregory Korso's Marriage by Sarah Duff, where she says, the milkman is a common aspect of suburban dwelling, and in subverting these elements, the speaker descends into what would be considered mad behavior. His actions are not appropriate to the circumstances. A lot of other allusions to this phrase, for instance, in 2004, a rock band Atomic Opera used it as the title for their new album, and the producer wrote of this rock band, Frank Hard, the producer, wrote the philosophical lyrics for a song entitled What Does Penguin Dust Mean?, based on the picture from the album cover, which you can observe. I skip this, although it is a very interesting topic. Okay, and a lot of other interesting translations, cases of choice by Andreyevich, which all allude to the post-Soviet Ukrainian cultural identity, and what I'd like to skip to, I'm sorry, may return to the pre-last the last one, Okay, thank you. The actually penultimate and ultimate slides. So Andreyevich seems to expose in translation the post-Soviet dependence of his Ukrainian reader audience on the former Soviet stereotypes that still exist, and he discloses certain kinds of schizophrenic identification provoked by this dangerous dependence when a person, this godless wonder from one of his translations of a phrase from poem Marriage by Gregory Corso. This godless wonder, which is Twixmia in Gregory Corso, it's an asemantic phrase, but Andreyevich translated it as Chudo v перьях. Well, and we can metaphorically extend this phrase suggested by Andreyevich, godless wonder, to his actually target readers audience, who this godless wonder does not know clearly who she or he is and believes this is normal. And brief conclusions. Both in his original writings and translations, Andreyevich shows his keen senses of the residuary provincial status of Ukrainian literature and the survival of Soviet stereotypes, or the Sovietness or Sovkovost of Ukrainian post-Soviet culture. Shifts of the source text allusivity through translation in Andreyevich thus are predominantly aimed at the burlesque deconstruction of Soviet narratives and their stems of the all-Soviet cultural identity. In Andreyevich resonates a particular narrative modality in style, which was established by the pioneer of modern Ukrainian literature Ivan Kotlяревский in his mock heroic 1798 Aeneida, written as a parody of Virgil's Aeneid, where Kotlяревский transformed the Trojan heroes into Zaporozhian Cossacks. Strategically, close to Kotlяревский, Andreyevich turns the curse of the province of Ukrainian literature, which consigned it to a minor status within the framework of all Russian imperial and Soviet narratives, into the burlesque and travesty of his postmodern style, and that has become a blessing pattern for the entire early postmodern Ukrainian literature as its distinctive feature. Thereby, through the choice of burlesque linguistic code, Andreyevich introduces into his text a parody of not so long ago high and canonic Soviet literary narratives and styles. What is pejoratively known as Kotlяревщина, which is play with the reader, curse speech, rather lowbrow types, earthly body humor, etc. This highly talented author, congenial with a Bakhtinian sense of parody, manages to transform into a particular Ukrainian postmodern narrative, alternative in its modality and style to the Soviet literary officialism. The travesty, therefore, serves Andreyevich as a basic model of his self-identification as a post-colonial Ukrainian author and translator. It is a way to shed off the shackles of provincialism, to dissociate the post-colonial Ukrainian identity from that of the former Russian language-centered colonial narratives, and to further separate Ukrainian literature from Russian imperial and Soviet canons. Thank you for attention.